Welcome to the Minotaur's Maze. Today, I'm joined by the magician Vik M, who is the author of the Goetic catalog, which is available on Amazon, and is the mage behind the Solomonic Magic Twitter account. Vik, thank you for being here and welcome.
It's a pleasure to join you. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. Well, I mean, like I said before I started the recording, I'm very excited about this podcast because this is a topic which I find very interesting. At the same time, it's a little nerve-wracking as well because it's there's some deep hidden dark forces in this kind of topic. But just to get this podcast going, could you possibly just give us a quick brief history about yourself, your background, who you are, and how you got involved in, well, magic, basically?
Sure. Well, to begin, I was actually writing a fantasy novel a couple of years ago, trying to get into that. And I wanted a really concrete universal magic system that, anyone in the world could pick up my book and feel like, hey, that's how magic is done where I'm around, because to me, I deeply appreciate cultures and global things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was studying magic and religion across the world, I began to notice a lot of similarities that seem to link up. And I come from like a scientific background. So for me, I was, the wheels were starting to turn and I'm beginning to wonder, maybe there's a little bit more to this than what we've given it. So, a little experimenting here and there. I first kind of delved into chaos magic, starting with Liber Null by Peter Carroll, which is a great book, by the way, for anyone who's interested in starting with magic. It's honestly a great book to go with. And eventually I came to a podcast, the Glitch Bottle podcast, which is a very great esoteric podcast if you guys want to check that out. And they had the guest Steven Skinner, who is honestly, he's the leading expert on Solomonic magic and a lot of Eastern practices too, which is very cool. He's got a whole West and East thing going on. But anyway, the way he described Solomonic magic in both its, one could say, scientific approach and the fact that it's lasted for thousands of years, it deeply intrigued me, as well as the physical manifestations that the spirits of the Goetia are able to bring. So I was deeply interested in that. And that's kind of how I got my start into Solomonic magic.
Okay, so before we continue, because the conversation is going to go that way, could you just tell us a little bit more about the scientific background that you just mentioned there? Like, I think I did read some of your tweets, like you've got a mathematics and a science background, but what type of science did you have a background in, and how, were you working in it? Did you study in it? What is your scientific background?
So I was actually getting, I was first starting with an English degree, and I did that for a bit, fell out of love with that. And I'm like, you know what, let's go into STEM, because why not? And I was doing computer engineering. And I did 3 years of that. And eventually I got a gig tutoring, because that's actually my mundane job. I'm a tutor.
Okay.
And I was like, well, this is a lot of money. I'd have more time if I just kind of graduated now instead of doing the extra 2 years I needed to get my engineering. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have a blend in both, I guess you could say, the arts and sciences, where I've done classes such as all three calculus, differential equations, physics 1 through 3, classes like that, while also doing stuff as anthropology of religion and very similar courses like that. So honestly, I've sometimes wondered if that degree was set up such a way where I have this hold in both the arts and sciences, because Aleister Crowley's famous quote that science is the science and art of causing change in conformity with will. I honestly feel sometimes that I was made to be performing magic with that kind of grasp of the arts and science, because magic dabbles in a little bit of both.
Brilliant. And I really wanted to bring that out because obviously from this opening introduction, it's quite obvious, you're an intelligent person, you've got a little bit of an academic background. And I want to bring that into the equation already, because when you talk about magic, obviously this has lots of connotations for many people in many different ways. There's the hocus pocus stage kind of magic, but what a lot of people don't realize is there is a very serious, I wouldn't say religion, I mean, it possibly is a religion, but there's a very serious study and execution of magic. So the question that I have for the audience really is, what is magic according to you, and how do you approach it in a way that it's not just something which is fun and kind of stage and tricks, but a serious form of study and practice for you?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the $1 million question. What is magic? You look at anthropologists, they even choose not to agree on one because it's too hard to do so. Definitely more opinions in the occult community. But the kind of definition that I go for is, I call magic the sympathetic study of conversation with spiritual creatures that result in physical and spiritual change.
Oh, okay. That's deep.
Yeah.
I'll let you unpack that then.
Sure. Yeah, we could go through it. So the reason I say the sympathetic study is because that's kind of the nature of how all magic is based. Somebody sees a red plant and they associate it with blood or strength. If I eat this red plant, it's going to give me strength, right? There's no other reason besides blood in this flower, say, having the color red. There's no other association besides that. However, that's kind of the main principle you see behind most magic. For example, the lion belt in the Goetia, that's one of the most coveted Solomonic items, right? The lion is the strongest animal in all of Africa. If I wear him, I'm going to be strong too. So it kind of follows this very basic logic, which is why I'd say it's kind of scientific, but at the same time, it's more of an art, because it's not like a set. It's not like a set science. And the reason why I say conversation with spiritual creatures is because, to me, when someone's performing magic, you're using all these symbols, whether they're actual items or art that is drawn or sketched, or even physical movements, I consider symbolic. These are representatives that speak on a higher realm, I guess you could say. That's kind of how we get the spirit's attention, through these means. There are some who claim that they could do magic just kind of with their thought alone, but I'm very hard pressed to believe that. I think there's something within us that requires our will performing, saying certain words or doing certain movements, that somehow that's what resonates within us. And then there's a popular, as above, so below, and so below as above, right? It echoes out upwards so that these spiritual creatures can reach us. And the last point I wanted to make about it causes change both on a physical and spiritual realm. I stress that because while magic can be very helpful in a spiritual sense, cultivating one's identity or overcoming personal issues or personality traits, I think the modern world has forgotten a lot that, magic's a very material thing. And I think often it gets regarded as, a psychotherapy in a sense, that magic can be used for very material things. Our ancestors have done that for generations and generations. And as we get later into how I define Solomonic magic, I think this material aspect is highly important for people to remember.
Of course. So, I mean, I know you've given a definition there, which was quite a lot to unpack, but there is another definition that I saw from your Twitter account, which obviously is similar, but I think the definition that I read is a lot more easily digestible for people that don't know what we're talking about. And that definition was, it's a scientific study of communicating with spiritual beings in order to change the material world and our own spiritual aspects. So from that, there's there's four elements. So firstly, it's the scientific study, and then it's the communication with spiritual beings, and then, which you've just kind of touched upon, it's changing the material world, but also making changes to personal, spiritual ascension, that kind of thing. So before we go forward, I mean, now might be a good time to introduce then what is Solomonic magic, and maybe if you could just give us a brief history of where Solomonic magic came from and where we're at today.
Sure. So Solomonic magic gets its name from King Solomon of the Bible, who's regarded as one of the wisest, if not the wisest, of all people in the Bible, and among certain traditions, regarded to have used demons and spirits and other forces to construct the Temple of Jerusalem, as well as expand the nation of Israel. However, though, this practice is not exactly Hebrew in origin, despite the name. We could actually see that Solomonic magic takes its roots from Greco-Egyptian Egypt. Alexandria in Egypt was kind of the heart of where this magic was taking place. And it was usually performed by the priest of Egypt, who, on their off time for kind of like a side hustle, they would take requests from clients to perform this and such. And when the Greeks came to Egypt, what they did, because the Greeks being very scientific people themselves, they took all these spells from magicians and personal journals and logs, and they kind of wrote it out in a more recipe cookbook way. And if anyone's interested in looking at these, basically the first spell book in a way, you could search the Greek magical papyri. That's its name, because these spells were written on papyri, which was the paper for Egypt. Eventually, though, when the Roman Empire turned, Christian, we saw the loss of a lot of these scrolls, and they kind of fell into obscurity. And a lot of them got shipped over to Constantinople when the empire split in two. And thankfully, there was practitioners within the East that kind of kept this tradition. And then eventually we see transition of these scrolls to Italy, where it began to take a more, I guess you could say, Jewish or Christian model. A lot of the Egyptian gods' names were replaced with names of, the Hebrew god Adonai, Sabaoth. You see a lot of replacements there. And it eventually evolved into the more Jewish and Christian system we see today. And eventually it hit England, where in the 1700s, we see the first English translation of this Solomonic method within the Lesser Key of Solomon. And, it eventually, we actually found, I believe, that there was a copy of the Lesser Key on the Mayflower when the Pilgrims came to America. That might be a myth, but that's something that I've heard. So it just kind of shows the infamousy of this magic system. So yeah, basically, in a sense, it's this transition from Greco-Egyptian Egypt, kind of darting around Europe, and then landing up in France, England, and Germany.
Okay, and what then is Solomon magic, and how is it different from the definition of magic that you started with?
Right. So for most people, the traditional sense of Solomonic magic is actually a 6-step method that I guess we'll walk through to kind of define it from other magic. Because folk magic or village magic, which people can most, when you think of a witch casting a spell, that's the kind of sort of thing you get, which that sort of magic is not any less powerful than Solomonic magic or any ceremonial magic. However, Solomonic magic has so many things set in place in order to kind of guarantee results and the protection of the caster. As you mentioned, there's a lot of dark forces going on here, and protection is honestly the most important part of Solomonic magic. So let's go through the first step. The first step is a consecration period. This is kind of where you begin getting your tools ready, picking the certain date of the ceremony, timing and location is a very important factor within Solomonic magic. Facing the right direction, working within a certain hour of a certain planet, these are very important things. In addition, you're preparing the tools that will be used later. Very commonly, white garments are common. Most people think of working with demons as kind of this dark, spooky, satanic thing that movies show. But in reality, Solomonic magic, you end up looking more like a priest. And honestly, you're taking the role of a priest because you're doing prayers. There's fasting from both food and sex. There's daily prayer, meditating on holy scriptures in a sense. In a way, you're kind of like like a video game sort of sense. You're building up your power level with whatever god you're choosing, and that's the great part about Solomonic magic is that even though the Egyptians and the Europeans had a different religion, they're both applying the same system. The Egyptians were praying to their gods for authority, and the Europeans are doing so the same way. And then the second phase is, kind of the beginning of the actual ritual. So that's applying the garments, giving your final consecrations to the wand, the circle. That's a very big common tool within Solomonic magic is the protective circle. Usually you have all the god names written around it, and that's something you're standing in. Some people think it's an actual physical barrier. I think there's a running joke that one Solomonic magician didn't want to have to memorize all the names, so he wrote it on the circle, so that way he didn't have to memorize it.
Okay.
But anyway, you kind of read through those names. It's kind of like your last steps. And then the third step is the calling of the spirit. And it's done so with various threats to the spirit, kind of, like if you don't come, I'm going to summon your master, because Solomonic magic works on like a hierarchical system where you kind of have like gods at the top and in some ways demons at the bottom with other various spirits sorted throughout. And even the demons have their own hierarchy where there are supposed 4 kings of hell that, at least within the Goetia specifically, each of those spirits corresponds to one of those kings. So in a way, it's kind of like you're walking to a retail store and you're threatening to call the manager on an associate, Yeah. If you don't give me what I want, I'm going to call your manager.
Right.
So that's the third one, the calling. And it's a very long step. There's so many threats and such. And eventually when the spirit shows, you kind of have a binding moment, because it's one thing to call a spirit and to get it to come, but to have it bound to you that's the key. And I think a lot of other practices, such as like demonolatry, which is a very recent practice where you see some of these demons being worshipped as gods. And I have many demonolator friends and I respect their practice, but at the same time, sometimes I wonder how much of they're getting of what they want without binding these spirits. And typically you have either a triangle or a certain object, such as, I'm sure many people are famous with the genie lamp of Aladdin. That's actually sourced in Solomonic magic, where you have the Arabic jinn trapped within water pots. So typically there's a variety of ways to bind these spirits to the object. And then the fifth step is kind of like, in a way you could call it like litigations. Basically, you begin working with the spirit like, hey, you and I, under God, we're going to get this task done. Tell me how you and I can best get this done. There's a misconception because of all the threats and the authoritative state you're taking over the spirit. You're kind of bossing it around. But the way that I see some of, at least, these demonic kind of spirits, they enjoy what they do. So it's really not a big thing for them to do. It's kind of trying to get them to do what they already want to do under your orders. So often you could see pacts being formed. Some of the spirits that I've worked with, I've had to give a little in order for them to get what I want and make it easier for them. So, and then typically that could be ended with what's called a Liber Spiritum, or a spirit book. Some people will actually write out their contract, like as if they were speaking to a lawyer. and you can ask for a sign or sometimes the spirit to actually make a physical mark in the book. And then the last step is the license to depart. And this is where you tell the spirit, you're free to go. I'm unbinding you, under the rule that you bring no harm to me or those who I love or such when I let you go. And sometimes it's good to ask for the spirit to come back faster the next time you call them. That way you don't have to do this very long ritual, which is why having a physical item that you've bound it to can be important, because later on you could just approach this physical item and summon the spirit without having to go through all these 6 steps again. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like Solomonic magic. You're gaining divine authority using certain tools and implements and timing in order to conjure spirits, gain authority over them, and have your wish be done.
Okay, so before I've got some questions about that process there, but before I move on to those questions, how is that then different from any other magic? Like, what makes this specific to Solomonic magic and not to any other type of magic?
Yeah, so if we want to give a comparison, where European folk magic, which I've done some research into, there's a lot of good magic in there as well. And there's very similar things like using certain items or tools. Wands are both popular in Solomonic magic and folk magic. However, there's little regard for timing. Typically in other systems, you don't see this hierarchical approach. You're not calling on a certain spirit's commanding officer to, bring about your will.
Okay.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, it's timing. Some of the objects are a little bit more expensive, such as like, you're not going to see a folk magician carrying around a lion belt or a solid gold ring,
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so in that process, obviously you talked about how you make these kind of threats and stuff, but why would these spirits be threatened by these threats? Like, what power do you have over them, or we as humans, what power do we have over them that they need to comply? In other words, what have they done? I don't know if I'm wording this right, but what have they done wrong, or why are they afraid of being their manager kind of being spoken to?
Mm-hmm.
Is there some kind of rule that they have to comply, or what is it that makes them abide by the threats that you make?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of schools of thought here. Some people think that the spirits have been bound by these words in the past, and because they've been bound by these words, it doesn't really matter who says it. That you repeating it grants you the same authority with whoever initially bound the spirits. I'm more of the camp of the consecration period, when you're gaining this authority with God in a way, by kind of like, you could definitely use Solomonic magic to gain wealth, but during that consecration period where you're really focusing on like your wealth, it should be really a matter of like, what are you going to use it for? You're kind of like gaining permission from the spirits, gods or God himself that are way above these spirits. You're gaining permission for your will to be done in a way. And if your will is not really aligned, this period kind of allows you in a way to set it in a way that's going to be correct. A lot. I've had someone call me like a left-hand magician, which typically in the occult community, a left-hand magician is seen as someone who embodies ego and power and money and like a very selfish means.
Mm-hmm.
But like I've mentioned, you're having to gain authority from spirits. You're kind of having to line your will up with the cosmos in a sense, and in doing so, you're gaining authority over the spirits as well. There's a lot of different schools of thought. Some people think that especially the demons of the Goetia, that they think they're a little dull or stupid, and they can't really tell if you're lying or not when you claim to be Solomon. So,
sorry, let me you just said something. So you claim to be Solomon. Is that did I just hear that right?
Well, in a sense, you're kind of, yes, Solomonic magic is kind of like role playing, that you're reenacting Solomon commanding the spirits to do
Right.
as Solomon did. Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll tell you right in maybe if we get to that far, but that's interesting.
Mm.
Um, so who let's talk about these spirits then, like who or what are these spirits? Like, you've talked about gods, you've talked about God. So, you know, according to you, then, is there one God that's the creator, the source, the divine of everything? And there's what are the lesser gods, and there are the spirits? What is the hierarchy according to your beliefs?
Right. So for me, in my kind of metaphysical map, or however you'd put it, I kind of take a Platonist approach where you kind of had a monad, or like an everything, and then from that splintered into all aspects of reality that we see today, where the gods of Egypt and the gods of China and Africa and all over the world, they are merely splinters of this one, I guess you could say, supreme impersonal being. That's a big key difference, is that in Platonism and within ceremonial magic, that this supreme being at the top is largely impersonal. Um, and to me, I think some in my approach that these, at least within um, Goetia and working with demonic forces, these demonic forces are spirits that are inherently tied to the earth. If we want to get into like exactly what demons are, to me, I feel that they're very similar to us in a way, because when we look at us, we're physical creatures, right? We have bodies, we got to eat, we got to sleep, the standard sort of things. Um, However, I would say our goals and our true kind of drives are very spiritual in nature, Um, like if we want fame and glory, that's not like a tangible thing you could really hold. Like, sure, you could hold money, but it's what you can get with the money that's more important, if that makes sense. Or love, or seeing, I don't know, bringing about good in the world, right? There's a lot of spiritual motivations people could have. So we kind of have this duality in humans. For demons and chthonic spirits, I kind of see them inverse to us, that they're spiritual in nature. They don't have a body. They're kind of conceptual, up in the air. However, their focus is on exactly the material. So they kind of, for example, you could have Paimon, who's famous for teaching about money and business and economics. That's just kind of what, in a way, it's kind of like a computer program. He's been programmed to learn and know and how to do that with little regard for morality, in a sense, because that is his morality, to get that sort of thing done. I think humans, and that's why I think demons often get a bad rap or are seen as evil, because their morality is different than us. And when you have some being that behaves in a completely different way, obviously it's going to be seen as evil for us. But you can't really blame a lion for hunting and killing a person. If a person walked in on a lion, you can't blame the lion for eating him, right? So it's the same way for me, that I believe the demonic spirits act in the same way. Angels, which are another important part of Solomonic magic, to me, they're kind of like, when we look at the original meaning of angel, it's messenger, right? They're kind of the go-between between the gods and humans, and they kind of have to carry out tasks on behalf of gods and stuff for them, because one can't really, it's very rare to have a god appear before you in, say, like physical form, or even having signs approached. Usually when people call on a god to do work, it's it's more kind of a prayer, right? You're not asking the spirit to appear before you. um Angels, on the other hand, they kind of are, they can be that physical manifestation, in a sense, for whatever god you're working with. They can appear before you, and in some ways, getting back to kind of like a retail metaphor, I kind of see them as also retail workers of the universe, and they kind of have to deal with us, the stupid customers, you know because many times I've seen, and myself too, people work with angels, and they're not quite like the graceful, loving kind of spirits presented within Christianity. They're often they're often quite harsh and rude at times, and I think that's because they're there to maintain the order or the will of whatever being they work under.
Before
So
you continue, I'm sorry to interrupt. So how would you
go
know
ahead.
something is an angel and not a demon pretending to be an angel?
That's a good question, and typically you could tell possibly in its behavior. Um, Angels aren't really ones to deceive, so maybe if you catch a spirit in a lie or its behavior doesn't seem to add up, you could typically attribute that to a demon. Because I think there are three main characteristics of a demon. Um, Typically, in demonology, there are three major spirits which rule over all. There's Lucifer, Satan, and Beelzebub. These are typically seen as the top three dudes. And I think all spirits each carry an aspect from each of them. Lucifer, the light bringer. Typically, Lucifer is seen as one you could speak to for knowledge and, in a sense, enlightenment. Spirits are very knowledge driven. If one looks in my Goetic catalog, I had to make a whole. There's different categories of the spirit's abilities, and I had to make a whole separate kind of category for knowledge and create their own subsections because there's so much that these spirits know and can teach. So that's an important virtue of demons is knowledge. And typically you don't really see angels teaching as much about the material as demons. Some traditions, of course, angels, there's plenty of scientists in the past who claim that angels gave them divine revelation. But typically you see chthonic or demons, like chthonic spirits or demons, really pushing this knowledge aspect. The second virtue you could kind of look for is a rebellious nature. Like I was mentioning earlier, these spirits, you kind of have to bound them to do what you want, right? That's why the whole Solomonic magic method exists. Because yes, one could pick up my Goetic catalog, find a spirit that, hey, I could really use some, I could use a girlfriend. Let me call on this guy to help me out, right? You could do that, but to really assure that one, you're going to be safe, and two, the spirit will do what you want, that binding aspect is very important. So, and that's because of their rebellious nature. I don't think, like I said, it's very animalistic in a way. It's part of their nature to kind of go against what people ask of them, which is why you kind of get this attributation that they're fallen angels, because it's not that they are evil. It's just that it's in their nature to go against things and ego driven in a way. And the last thing is, Beelzebub is typically called like the Lord of the Flies, the Great Liar. And many times in the Goetia, you'll see like tips on how to make sure the spirit tells the truth. And that's because I think the spirits, they like playing with reality, whether it's lying, and creating up a false narrative, or whether it's literally changing the world, which is part of what they do, right? They change the material world. Demons like to play with reality. So that's another core aspect. Typically, you're not going to see these things within angels.
Okay. So again, there's so many questions I've got, and I'm kind of losing track of it all in my mind now. So remind me to come back on Lucifer and Satan.
Sure.
But the question that I had before all of this was, okay, so these spirits, are they a part of Earth, or are they from another planet, or are they from another universe? Like how many are out there, and how far can you go in terms of trying to communicate or bind one to you? Like, I suppose another way to put it is, how many realities are there? How many parallel universes out there? How does it all fit in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like I said, I kind of have a Platonic worldview where Plato, he had this idea that there's the world of forms and perfect archetypes and ideas, and then we have the world of material, which is where we are, right? We're these kind of poor reflections of of what's in the world of ideas. Like there's the famous like an apple. An apple can exist in the world of ideas. It's like perfect in every way that an apple should be. And then here on Earth, we have poor reflections of apples that rot and don't taste good, or maybe they're not the right color, right? Um, for me, I think that these spirits that Plato's referring to, this world of forms, I think the spirits and gods and angels and elementals, whatever, that they all kind of exist on this spiritual realm. If we're talking about like how many realms there are, within Western ceremonial magic, there is divisions based on like the 7 classical planets, where you kind of have, I guess you kind of have heaven on the outside, and then you have Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the sun, Mercury. You kind of work through all the planets, each with its own division. And then eventually we come down to Earth, where it's kind of like these ideas and thoughts start off in heaven and pass through each of these realms of the planetary spheres and eventually manifest here on Earth. So as far as also as, having a spirit appear before you, because that's another thing too. It's typically very rare for an angel to appear before you, while a demon can. A lot of people ask, are they really there? Is it all in your head? And I think it's a kind of a combination of both. I think they cause a hallucination in your head to see them in a form that you would understand. But I think just because you're hallucinating it doesn't make it any less important, because if one's sober and of a clear mindset and you're seeing the spirit, having a conversation back and forth with you, or you're getting messages passed to your head, I don't see that any different than talking with a person. So whether they exist here, I don't think that spirits really exist on the physical realm. I like I said, I think they exist within this other spiritual world, which has its own divisions.
Okay. And you touched upon Lucifer and Satan. So normally these are considered to be different words for the same entity, but what you're suggesting is these are completely different entities. So in terms, obviously, from the traditional religious point of view, Satan, Lucifer, Iblis, whatever word you want to use, this is the fallen angel, although in Islam is not exactly considered an angel. He's considered a jinn. But the whole aspect of Satan or Lucifer is he did not bow down to the will of God and therefore was cast out, and therefore his role is to be the enemy of humans. But I suppose that's not how we, in the magic world, these characters wouldn't be viewed the same, or are they? Like, what is your perception of, firstly, what is the difference between Satan and Lucifer, and what is the perception of these beings? Are they just people with wisdom that can help, or are they people that are the entities that need to be fought against?
Yeah, so I'll go out and say that they're not the same figure. That's kind of, to be honest, the devil or the satanic figure that we see in Christianity is kind of its own invention. There wasn't really a devil figure before that, at least within Hebrew and Jewish culture. There wasn't really like a devil character. And the origins of Lucifer actually come from ties to Venus, because Venus is seen as the most brightest star in the world, the light bringer that comes up in the morning. And so it's kind of like a title tied to Venus. And Venus being the goddess of beauty. This is why you get in Christian culture, people typically refer to Satan as being like, or Lucifer, oh, that's the most beautiful of all the angels, that that's going to deceive you because you think it's so beautiful looking. And I think the two ideas kind of got tied together because Satan is kind of a title, and it's a title that got tied to this Lucifer figure that becomes the main enemy within Christianity. But in the way that I've worked and talked with some other, demonologers who specifically worship these two beings, they're very different, very, very different. Lucifer kind of obsessed with correcting, in a way, kind of setting the record straight with knowledge, kind of helping out those who've had knowledge hidden from them, which, for many, that could be seen as like an evil thing, that sometimes people keep away knowledge from others for their own good. So when some other guy comes and claims and reveals all the secrets, kind of like Edward Snowden, right? He revealed all of America's secrets, and he's the bad guy. But Americans should be informed of what's going on. So in a way, you could kind of see it's parallel. Lucifer's bringing the knowledge that's being hidden from us. And in the same way, Satan kind of embodies that more in a power sense, kind of fighting the societal oppressors that be, kind of overthrowing, in a way, it's more like political in nature and spiritual too. Kind of, if your spiritual practice takes you against the grind, Satan's going to be the one to kind of push you and help you, guide you in a way that, like, hey, I'm going to show you, like, how to do it your own way and get what you want.
Okay, the reason I bring that up, because I like I said, I've got an interest in this stuff, and I used to read books probably about 10-15 years ago, and the impression that I got is, because a lot of religious people, they don't understand, why would anybody worship Lucifer, or why would anyone see the devil as a good thing, yada yada yada. But from reading those books all those years ago, the impression I got was, well, this belief system is different. They don't see God as good and the devil as bad. They just see the devil or Lucifer as an entity which has been misrepresented in history. So when they call upon Lucifer, or they call upon Satan, they're not calling an evil entity. This is their beliefs. Their beliefs are this is just somebody who's been misunderstood, but somebody or an entity that can be helpful. So the point, I suppose, I'm trying to make here for all of those people that don't understand why would anybody worship Satan or follow Satan or call upon Satan, it's not because they believe this is an evil entity, it's that they've got a completely different belief system, and in that these entities are not evil, but they can be used to help humanity.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so linked to that then, or not linked to that, but what is then the purpose of magic? Like, obviously with religion, it's quite easy. The whole point of religion is to be a guide to live the best life here, and then to get into the afterlife and basically connect the soul that we have here to God. So what is the purpose of magic? Like, why should humans use it? Or, what is your intention and mission with it?
Yeah, kind of speaking on that, you mentioned magic and religion. I kind of wanted to talk about that real quick.
Yeah, go
ahead. I think when people try to draw lines between magic and religion, it can be very hard to tell the difference sometimes, to be honest. Stephen Skinner, who I learned a lot from and I look up to and stuff, he kind of draws a hard line at religion being a communal sense, while magic takes on a more personal one-on-one approach. And he also claims that magic is strictly material, but I really don't believe that, because a lot of angel work is strictly spiritual, and that falls under Solomonic Magic very well. So I don't really agree fully with his separation that it's material and spiritual. I don't think it works that way. Otherwise people wouldn't pray together for someone to be healed in the hospital, right? So in a sense, when we look at magic, really, it's often magic is often the religion of one's enemy or a different culture. The word magic comes from, mageos, like the Greek word for the priest of Persia, right? For the Greeks, we do theurgy, we're, priest of the gods, while those dirty Persians are practicing magic that's lowly. So in a lot of ways, magic and religion are kind of hard to separate. But in a way, the way I see it is that religion kind of provides the hows and the whys, and magic kind of gives us the means to get there, if that makes sense, you know? So for me, one of the goals that I've had with this account and what I'd like to do with Solomonic Magic in general is turn it away from it just being a set, oh, do this, and this, that's Solomonic Magic. I think it should be more of a philosophical or even religious system where one is embodying the archetype of Solomon. And I think there's four major attributes to that, which is knowledge, as Solomon was the wisest king, riches, and that being material riches too, in the sense that, you know, how is one supposed to do anything that they feel compelled to do if they don't have the means? Another is nobility, in the sense of, you know, this kind of ties into the whole authority theme that Solomonic Magic has, that as a noble, you know, you're gaining authority because you're embracing these virtues that are important, in a way that we all can become kind of kings and queens in our own right. And the last one is charity, because, you know, Solomon, while he was he was the wisest and the richest, he didn't really hoard it all for himself. He gave it back to the nations of Israel and even the other nations that are around the world. Solomon, there's a lot of stories of him negotiating with other countries and being very willing to give to other peoples. So in a way, I think the way that I view magic is, honestly, years before I even encountered magic, in my personal life, there was a lot of ways that I wasn't really happy with the way the world worked, and I could get through my daily life, you know. But I think the thing that sparked for me when I discovered magic was that here is this solution to all the issues that are going on in the world: hunger, housing crises, the climate, all these problems that are going on. Here we have the final solution, that basically to bring miracles. And so having that realization was important for me, because I do think, and I encourage magic to be used to solve the problems within the personal life and the world at large. So yeah, that's kind of where I think magic should be used.
Okay, I mean, sticking to that theme, like, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Like, obviously I'm not an expert in magic by any stretch of the imagination. I've just read a few books, and it's something that, you know, like I said, it had my interest, but corporate life kind of took me away from that path. But the books that I read were books by you know, Manly P. Hall. I don't know if you heard of him. The Secret Teachings of All Ages. The other really powerful one that I read back in the day was The Tree of Life by Israel
Regardie.
Yeah,
Israel Regardie, yes.
Regardie, yeah, that's the one. And then there was one called Comte de Gabalis, and there's been other, you know, in terms of gnosis and where they try to explain the Christian works as a purely spiritual analogies rather than physical or literal meanings. But the sense that I got, well, I mean, those books, like I think the Israel Regardie one, what I got from them is basically magic isn't just obviously the hocus pocus stuff. We'll just keep that to the side. That's stage magic. That's just completely something separate. But magic is normally considered as evil. But there's two types. Like even in Islam, there's what's considered black magic. Now, just for the audience sake, like obviously I'm a Muslim, and magic is something which is outlawed. So that means it exists. We believe it exists, but we're not allowed to practice it, and we're not allowed to dabble with it. And obviously there'll be various reasons for that. So and also, I don't know if you know, but in the Islamic tradition, Solomon is actually a prophet of God. So we as Muslims hold Solomon in high esteem. He's a prophet of God, just like Moses and Jesus and Muhammad, may peace be upon them all. It's just that Muhammad was the final prophet of God in these lines of prophet, which I think is different from the Christian perspective, because I don't think they hold Solomon in the same esteem. So just before I continue, were you aware of that?
Yes, I actually have a lot of interest in Muslims looking at magic, theurgy, talismanic magic. To be honest, one of the books that I work most from is from the Picatrix, which is it's basically a Muslim book on planetary talismans. So, and I do appreciate Islam for putting Solomon in such a high regard compared to Christianity.
Yeah. I mean, we will touch upon that in going back to what I was trying to say earlier. So the impression that I got from these books is that with magic, right, it's also, it's like religion in the sense that it's about spiritual ascension. Obviously it can be used for material gains, but it's like the spiritualists of the esoteric. Obviously in Islam you've got Sufis, in other religions you've got those that are more, they're more concerned about the afterlife, they're more concerned about spiritual ascension, and magic is to be used to basically strengthen the spirit and make it ascend into the different levels of heaven, that kind of thing. And to do that, it requires a lot of discipline, a lot of focus and concentration. And like you mentioned earlier, it's about protection, because one mistake, and it might not even be a big mistake, right? Even just one thing missed off could open you to negative entities and bad entities. So it's kind of like religion, but playing by different rules, or not playing by different, playing within the same rules, but on the different aspects. For example, for me as a Muslim, my goal is to obviously spiritually ascend as well. Now, the Quran and the rules of Islam, it gives me guidance to how to live my best life here in the material world, whilst also taking care of the spiritual aspect of myself, which is obviously to worship God and to reunite with God with a pure soul when I pass on from this life. But the way we do it is with, obviously it's the same, ritualistic prayers. Obviously the Quran it's a recitation, so you read these words out loud, and these words have power. And obviously we have the 5 daily prayers, but there's other forms of what's called zikr, which is the remembrance of God. But these are ways for the soul to ascend, which kind of like is basically magic, but using the Quran. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you're using spells and basically invoking entities to kind of like do the same thing. Am I on the correct understanding there?
Are you kind of like referencing like white versus black magic?
Sort of. Well, obviously, when we talk about Islam, it's not considered magic. That's just our religion, and we do it.
Right.
But the goal, what I'm trying to get at, is the goal is spiritual ascension.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also a goal of magic, but doing it obviously with the format that you do it with?
Yeah, there's definitely so a common term. This definitely not. This wouldn't be within Islam, but a common goal for many magicians is apotheosis, where you're either becoming a god, or you're becoming one with God, or you're becoming, this union. In Hinduism, the word yoga literally means like to yoke, right? You're becoming one with God. And I think a comparison that might help you out, I often compare religion to science and magic to engineering, right?
Okay.
Engineering is kind of like using the truths and things found within science, but in like a problem solving sort of way, right? So kind of the same way, I think religion is there to find truths and understand and discover and kind of bring us what our goals should be, while magic is the means to those goals. Engineers, they learn science, right, and all these equations in order for them to best apply it in how they need to solve their problems.
Okay, got it. So coming back to then your mission, then you obviously you mentioned it to me that you're trying to combine the spiritual and the mundane world.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously there is a spiritual aspect, but there's also a material aspect, according to you. So
Yes.
how then, obviously when you look at the world today, the majority of the world, they don't even believe in religion that much anymore, let alone
Mm-hmm.
magic and spirituality. But how could you bring magic as you've defined it into the corporate world, into the sciences and the professional fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see a lot of, for example, polytheists, or there's a lot of people who kind of want to, bring magic back into the very secular world. And I kind of think to do so at large is kind of pointless, because throughout history, magic in its practice has been shunned upon, you know. Um, the magician has never been one seen as high in society, yet, they're always the ones that are called upon by kings and stuff to work. So I think um, one effort of magicians should be, rather than, I guess you could say, trying to make others conform to their beliefs and worldviews, you know, I think magicians should really work on themselves and develop their abilities and powers and such, so that they could, you know, show direct manifestation of what they could do for others. A big role model for me is John Dee, very famous magician. He created his own Enochian system. He was the right-hand man of Queen Elizabeth, and a lot of his goals were set out to do what's best for the nation of England. And he even coined and came up with the idea of the British Empire, which, not the not the most ethical thing that resulted from that, but at the same time, right? He was concerned with doing what's best for his country, and the British Empire is kind of what he saw the future of. In the same way, I think that, like, for example, I think scientists and, for example, I'll give you a really clear example. So one of my mentors, John King, very, very knowledgeable and practical magician. His workings are so kind of, they're famous, but at the same time, they're not. Like, they're famous within the right circles. He was contacted by the Arab Emirates to help. They basically asked him to enchant their scientists so that they could understand better space travel.
Wow. Okay.
Because, when we look at the nations that have really gone into space, it's very limited, right? You have like China, US, Russia. Some other astronauts get to go to the space station, but really it's not as global as it is down here, right? And certainly not the Arab Emirates having any presence in space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you look at 2020, they were one of the first to send basically a Mars satellite. They kind of like skipped right over the moon and went right to Mars. So that's kind of like a direct result of, John King basically, in a way, asking his spirits to help the scientists kind of like see and understand what they couldn't before, if that makes sense.
So just to clarify this, the United Arab Emirates, which is a Muslim country, have basically got hold of your mentor,
yep,
to help them get to space using spirits.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Brilliant. That's a
yeah.
bombshell.
I think often, I think people, because of the situations they're in, I think people are very limited as the capabilities of magic, like, yeah, definitely doing magic to get rent money is nice, but, using magic to bring Africa out of a third world, continent status, that's even more impressive. And I think that's entirely possible. And that's something like my mentor, John King, kind of stresses, like that meant that instead of like countries asking for help, instead of like doing magic or doing fundraisers to get money sent to them, it's kind of about going there or having spirits being sent there that can facilitate and lay the infrastructure for these countries to do better. Because obviously, I don't want to get super political, but, for example, for Africa, the world's been throwing money at Africa for a very, very long time. But really haven't seen the results that people would hope to. And I think that's because they lack the guidance and infrastructure that's needed to develop. Um, Wealth and economy, this is something from Payman. Wealth and economy is more than just cash. It's having actual things or having the means to do things, right? That's the true nature of wealth. And it's better to have the ability to make something than having the money to buy it from someone else. So and that's what these countries lack. They don't really have that. And that's why I think the nobility aspect of Solomonic magic, where you could in teaching these people, you're stressing how to be embracing virtues that are going to lead to success and cooperation amongst communities. That's another big thing. Like I said, I kind of have a communal aspect to magic because a lot of magicians, they practice in solitude, or they make their goals just about themselves. But I definitely think giving back and supporting the community is most important.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I said that's a bombshell is because obviously it's a Muslim country, and like I said, Muslims are forbidden from delving in magic and communing with spirits, which obviously, it doesn't stop them because lots of Muslims do it. And you mentioned it before, black magic and white magic. What is your definition, or what is the difference between black magic and white magic according to you?
So I used to kind of, it's a very popular way to kind of divide magic and stuff. I used to kind of work in that mind frame. I don't so much because because the way that I kind of realized it was, before I saw white magic kind of being about elevating others, and left is about kind of elevating yourself.
Right.
But at the end of the day, when we look at it, right, like the right, where you could one call it like the loss of ego, the right hand path, where you kind of, it's not just about you, it's about others, it's about the state of the world, right? When we look at that end goal, and you're reaching, I guess you could say, union with God and being one with him, it's kind of the same endpoint of left hand magic, where whether you're becoming God or you're becoming one with him, it's kind of the same thing at the end of the day. So that's why I don't really see left and right hand as different. Or for example, you could do, say, white or right hand magic to help people, but you have no idea how that could have resulted. It could have resulted at the detriment of others. Like, others could have suffered as a result of your magic to do good for, say, your friends or family. And in a way, when you're doing good for others, it's kind of like you're still kind of celebrating your own ego, because you're choosing people that you're close to and you care about, and that seeing them happy or like seeing them healthy is going to make you feel happy. Like, at the end of the day, you're still celebrating the ego. So I think the divisions are just kind of pointless in a sense.
Well, I suppose the difference then is, obviously, you're talking about using magic to make your life better, and then to use that, by making your life better, whether it's material riches or whatever way it is, you're then in a position to help other people, which goes back to your 4 principles of Solomon, which is charity. But I suppose black magic is more using magic and these spirits to bring harm to other people, or another way is to use it to get whatever you want at the detriment or at the cost of other people. In other words, as long as you get what you want, it doesn't matter if 1,000 people die or if 1,000 people are homeless.
Yeah.
Is that not the difference then between white and black magic?
Yes, you could definitely make it so. It'd be hard to say, because like there's a lot of traditional and historical love spells like that kind of operate in that black magic sense. So basically you're forcing a woman to think of nothing other than you, or like she can't sleep, she can't eat unless she's with you. So it's like, in a way, most people would think of love spell as kind of a right hand thing, possibly, or a white magic thing. You're bringing love, but it's like you're kind of cursing someone. So Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a good question of like, I definitely do think there are curses, yes. But again, the thing is, like, we don't know exactly how these spirits are operating the way they do. I wish I could understand how exactly how they do each operation, but again, we're only humans, so we're limited in what we can understand and how they operate. And I think, yeah, sometimes it can be. I think sometimes trying to divide lines can be detrimental.
Because yeah, I mean, obviously it's folklore, but there is a superstitious belief, especially in the Pakistani community, which I'm a part of, and you know, obviously demons in Islam are basically jinn. So obviously we call them jinn. The word jinn is in the Quran, and these are the entities we're forbidden from dealing with. But obviously, like I said, there are Muslims out there and other people that do use jinns to cause harm onto other people. And that's traditionally considered as black magic in our tradition. Which I suppose the question here then is: are jinns different from demons, or you know what? Because I've heard you mention jinn as well. What is a jinn to you?
It could be hard to say. You know, I've definitely done a lot of research into like Islam and listening to other speakers. You know, you talking about how like there's practicing Muslims working with jinn to cause harm. Like, I was listening to this one story about this guy who basically pissed off a whole clan of jinn. So he had to work with a magician to kind of beat up each one individually or something. But anyway,
so do you believe in jinn? I'd like to make you ask you, do you personally believe in jinn, or is this just another word for demons?
I wouldn't say that I don't believe in them. It's just that I don't know. It's hard to say because even in Islam, like typically when you had missionaries moving out, you know, and they go to a foreign nation who had their own religion there. And you had the missionaries come and say, oh yeah, the gods you're working with those are just jinn. So it's kind of hard to say. It's like, well, where do the lines divide between gods and spirits and angels and jinn? When it's kind of like it almost becomes like a blanket term. Now my mentor John King, he has a theory that the 72 spirits of the Goetia, because we have to remember that these 72 that are within the Goetia, they're not the only, I guess you could say, demons out there. These are just very, very powerful ones who command legions of inferior ones. He thinks that these 72 are I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Ifrit. They're like, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Ifrit,
yeah.
He believes them to be the Ifrit. So, and because of Solomonic magic kind of existed because of Islam, which is why I kind of have a high regard for it. It was preserved in a lot of ways through Islam. So could they be jinn? I'm not sure. It's interesting. I've heard some people connect jinn to electricity because they're often.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that point up because the description given to jinn is obviously these are unseen beings, hidden beings, they're of a different reality. But they're, in a sense, they're like humans. There's good jinn, there's bad jinn. You know, they've got their own. You know, the Quran is actually a book for jinn as well, not just for humans. And basically, they're not allowed really to communicate with us, and we're not allowed to communicate with them. But one of the descriptions given is that they are made of smokeless fire. Now that could be a metaphor for electricity, but ultimately smokeless fire is just another form of energy. So they're just a different form of energy, but that's where the electricity aspect comes from, because the description given for them is that they are made of smokeless fire, which obviously gives them a different, kind of reality, different kind of power. So they've got, superior speed. They can be at multiple places very quickly. Even in the stories of Solomon, like when there's one such story. I mean, don't quote me on this, but because this is, I can't remember it exactly, but you know, when Solomon's asking about the kingdom of Sheba, you know, there's a jinn there that says, well, let me go and find out for you. In other words, I can go there now and come back to you. But then, as the story goes, there was a difference being a being of light, which had even faster speed than the jinn itself. But that's where the electricity aspect comes from it, and obviously from the Islamic tradition again. Like I said, Solomon was a prophet. Now he was endowed with wisdom, etc., and he could speak to the animals. But the other thing that he had was he could communicate with jinn, and he had power over jinn, which no other human being or no other prophet had. And this is why earlier on I said I'm going to come back to this when you mentioned that when you're trying to invoke these spirits, you're basically saying that you're enacting yourself in a way that you're Solomon. So you know, one of the stories is that there were a legion of jinn where they were chained, and basically they had to serve Solomon, and he got them to do tasks, which was basically building these great buildings, lots of architecture. Basically, he used these jinn to get stuff done. And now this is more not widely accepted in most of Islam. So this is more modern day, very probably 0.11%, which subscribe to this theory. But one of the theories out there is the Antichrist. Obviously, there's an Antichrist figure in Islam as well called the Dajjal. And one of these theories is that when Solomon died, like the story of Solomon, I don't know if the death of Solomon is the same in the other traditions, but in the Islamic tradition, the death of Solomon is that he was on sitting down on his staff, and then nobody realized that he passed away until a gnat or a termite chewed away at his staff, and then he fell over. Is that in the other traditions as well, or is that the first you're hearing of that?
Yes, when I was reading through your Twitter threads, that was the first I've heard of that story.
Okay, so that's fair enough. But anyway, that's the story of you know how he passed away. But that doesn't make sense. Obviously, he's a prophet, he's a king. But just to cut a long story short, the premise is that Solomon passed away, but these jinn that were under his control didn't realize that he passed away, and then another being took his place, and those jinn at the moment currently believe that Solomon is still alive and they're acting for Solomon, but in fact there's this other being, which is the Antichrist Dajjal, which is directing them to do this kind of stuff, which is why I found it interesting when you said you reenact yourself to be Solomon. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Like, would these demons or entities, would they not do your bidding if they didn't believe you were not Solomon?
It's hard to say because again, like Solomonic magic is it's not rooted just in within this like Jewish or Muslim or or Christian kind of mindset, Abrahamic thing. Like it was for the Egyptians did it. Taoist priests in China perform their own version of Solomonic magic. It's like a very global system. So
I suppose why didn't you try to enact Solomon, or are you trying to make these entities feel like you are Solomon? What just go back to that when you mentioned it earlier. What is the point, or what is the premise there? What is the whole point of that?
Yeah, I mean, for those who attribute that because some believe that the book is actually written by King Solomon, at least the lesser and the greater key. We have no idea who the real authors were.
Okay.
And at least in secular history, many don't even find Solomon to be a real being. I mean, obviously there could be records that have been lost to history that there was a true King Solomon, but for the most part, there's a lot who don't even think he existed. So, and again, you have the people who believe that the spirits aren't very good at telling the truth or not. So some people, because they believe in the actual story of Solomon happening, they lean more into pretending to be him, so that the spirits respond to that, this binding that's been set by Solomon centuries ago. And it's funny, you see this pretending to be Solomon sort of thing. You see something very similar within the Greco-Egyptian magic, where you see people pretending to be Hercules, people pretending to be Osiris, the god of, the dead himself, in order to command these spirits. Or I am Thoth Hermes, or like Thoth Mercury. You see the Egyptian priests pretending to be gods in order to gain authority. So it's definitely less of like it being specifically Solomon and more of kind of like this,
right?
I guess you could say role playing of being a greater authority than
Okay.
one truly might be.
So when obviously you mentioned Thoth and you mentioned some other things, but are the spirits of these entities still out there? Like, can you communicate with these? Like, I bring that up because another book that I read a long time ago was by Drunvalo Melchizedek. I don't know if you've heard of him, but it's called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, something like that. And he says he basically communicates with Thoth. I think that's the same as Hermes. But he communicates with him regularly. So these people, they're pretending to be these guys, or do the actual spirit of these entities come down into these people, and do people get possessed by them?
You're asking, are people being possessed by the same spirit from the past?
I suppose there was two questions in there, so we'll do with the possession afterward. The first question then is, can you, instead of trying to enact and role play these spirits, can you actually communicate with those spirits themselves, or as the words you use, the gods?
The same spirits of the past?
Yes.
Yes, I do think so. I do think that they're like their life cycle, like the spirit or their power, it works in a very different way than us. I think a lot of their strength or their power is related to how much like honor and praise they have, because you see names are a very incredibly important part of Solomonic magic and almost magic in general. While like the pronunciations you could mess up or mispronounce a bit, trying to have that set like base name is very important. I'm not going to use Baal to summon Payman or Payman to summon Stolas. It might be Stolos or Stolas or Stalas. Like there's different pronunciations, but it's very different than say Payman. So like in a way, these names are very important at the end of the day. And when we think about the names, they're just kind of like their titles, right? Like, for example, Alexander, meaning great defender, right? That's referring to actions he's done. So when you're calling these spirits by these names, you're kind of like singing praise of what they've done, which is why like, what's it called? Flattery, when you're speaking to a god, using titles and flattery is very important because it brings, in a way, it empowers them. This is what I've found, by the way. This is not like set in stone. And I think because most of these spirits, at least within the Goetia, that these were once gods of other people. Some people claim that, for instance, Vasago, who's the third spirit, they claim that that's Vishnu. There's connections to Vishnu from Hindu religion. And because some of these spirits are no longer worshipped in the same way they were years ago, it's the same spirit, but their power has been greatly reduced in a way. It's hard to say. It's hard to say like which were actually gods being worshipped or which were demons being worshipped as gods. But I do think people today can still speak to spirits of the past. Okay. I still think they do exist. I think many of them are not in the same form as they were, perhaps. Some of the more like, I guess you could say pagan gods, perhaps like Thor or Odin. I don't think they exist in the same state they once were before. But I do think at the end of the day, it is still the same spirit.
Okay, brilliant. And just carrying on from that, then obviously let's talk about the potential drawbacks and the dangers. And obviously possession is one such danger.
at least within Solomonic Magic, there's so many safeguards. I really would I really would doubt you get possessed. Now, my mentor, he claims that some people kind of like try to shut off from allowing the spirit to enter their head. While he says, like, if you don't let a spirit enter your head and kind of understand what your true desire or goal is, and a spirit just goes off of your words, they might completely misconstrue what you're saying. At the same time, I don't think he equates like letting the spirit, kind of like read your mind as being possessed or controlling you. Now within other forms of Solomonic magic, like in Vodun in Haiti, they allow possession in some forms to within their styles of Solomonic magic, because it's very comparable in some ways. They do allow the spirit to have a little bit more leeway and allowing the spirit to act through them. So, but at the same time, both have kind of the authority of God, kind of being the binding agent within this relationship. So there's less harm. A couple months ago, I had a debate with my friend Viv, who's on Twitter, and they're a demonologist. And we had like a demon debate. What is the nature? How should we treat these demons? And one thing that I was pressing them about is that within demonology, there's very little respect for protection. There's no circles of protection. There's really there's nothing at all to protect oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely do, concerns of possession or poltergeist activity. Some people claim that they've forgotten to do the binding to the license to depart, allowing the spirit to go free, that they didn't do that part correctly, and they had poltergeist activity in their homes. So definitely all these pieces of the Solomonic method do allow for safety. And it's typically why I embrace it so much, is that it's a reliable and safe way to practice magic without having to worry about such things as possession or making the stereotypical deal with the devil. I got to trade my soul to get this.
Okay, yeah, because it's interesting, because like I said, those books that I read, they were very like massive disclaimers, like massive warning signs, like, this path is not for everybody, simply because of the amount of discipline required. And if I remember correctly, like, this is about 10-15 years ago, but in training, in talking about training, like one of the strategies for training was to train discipline, do what you've got to do, and if you make a mistake, then cut yourself, because that's the level of discipline required to avoid making a mistake. Because if you make a mistake, then the dangers are very real and they can be very catastrophic. Like, obviously you're saying Solomonic magic is more safe, but are the other forms of magic maybe not that safe? Like, how dangerous is it, and how easy is it for a spirit to possess you if you don't do it properly?
I typically don't, for the most part, I think the basic human person is kind of safe from being possessed by a spirit. These spirits, they kind of have a lot better things to do than possess people. I mean, they're definitely playful. I could see them wanting to, for example, possess someone to do, I don't know, some trickery, right? Like I mentioned, they like to play with reality and alter it. I do think that I think respect is what's most important for spirits, because you see both within Solomonic magic and demonology, there's praise and respect for the spirit. It's not like, come here, slave, and do what I want. It's not like that at all. When within the Goetia, when the spirit appears, you sing like praises to it, like, welcome, great spirit, thank you for approaching. And I all these praises that one would not think is in something as holy as Solomonic magic in a way. So like there's definitely a level of respect for these beings, and I think that's what's most important, because like I said, they're not malevolent beings. They're not here. But at the same way, they definitely can cause harm when offended. So I'll give you a personal story for your listeners. So one spirit that I've worked with is Stolas. And part of his, give and take was like, can you kind of mention to people some of the stuff I do for you if I do it then? And I agreed to do so. And one night I was out with friends at a bar, and being stupid drunk, I was like, oh yeah, they had a chalkboard there that you could draw and stuff. And I was like, oh, here, I'm gonna put Stolas's great name on the chalkboard. So I drew his sigil and made a big like joke out of it with my friends. And long story short, it resulted in like the next morning, kind of my best friend's bird dying. There was like poltergeist activity all night, and in the morning, her perfectly healthy bird died. And I took that as a sign because Stolas often appears as a bird, whether it's owl, raven, like that. He chose to inflict harm on this bird to show the sign, like, look, you can't be messing around with me. Like, this is, I can. I think that's another thing too. People kind of, especially Stolas, they make the demons seem cuter than they are, and they're really not cute or like jokeful beings. Like these are beings of power that they deserve respect in any approach you pick from. So I think that's definitely the danger. Imagine approaching some ruler and coming in there dressed poorly, not have showered, trying to call a ruler by his first name. That'd be completely disrespectful, and you're probably going to get thrown out of the out of there. It's the same way with approaching these beings. So again, for the most part, as long as one's respectful, I think I don't think one is at harm for malevolent beings.
Okay, how is it that you communicate with them? Obviously, is there a language barrier? Is it telepathic? Like, if, for example, if you're invoking a being from a different part of the planet, obviously English would not have been their first language, that kind of thing. So what is the method of communication, and how is it that you can understand each other?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, because I think action and words are very important and an integral part of magic. I do think one should speak in their native language, or whatever language they could best express themselves in. And the spirit, like, you could hear it audibly, but in my opinion, it's speaking either kind of like with your soul or your mind or your spirit. Like, it's not really communicating through physical mean, although you can hear it.
Okay, so it is kind of more like telepathic kind of thing.
Yeah, sometimes people don't even get words, like they'll get feelings instead, or they'll get sense, like do you agree with this? I've heard one person that they asked that, and they all of a sudden they smelt the smell of blood, which they took that as a no. So
how would you then know that's a spirit talking, or it's just, obviously we get lots of thoughts in our head. How is it, how would you be able to tell, especially if you're in a state of anxiety and stress, and you're doubtful about yourself and things, like how would you be able to tell that's the spirit talking and not just your thoughts going out of control?
Yeah, it's definitely a very important thing, and that's something I still ask myself. And even my mentor, who's been practicing for a while now, he said, sometimes he goes to bed at night wondering, am I just insane? Like, what am I doing? It's the issue with every magician. And if you have a magician who claims that they're 100% like, oh, this is 100% real, I know exactly what I'm doing, that's definitely a false magician, because one should truly be skeptical and doubtful if they want to perform real magic and not just deceive themselves. But you definitely want to allow room for, I guess you could say, supernatural signs, in a sense. Like, either for example, I had asked for, when one of my first workings, I'd asked for a supernatural sign, and the next morning my lawn furniture was flipped all over, and there was no one who could have touched it.
Yeah.
So, and I tried doing it myself, and it wouldn't have been easy for the wind to have done it. So that's what I took as a sign. um you have all sorts of people having different sort of signs, bells ringing, or maybe hearing a bird or a dog where there shouldn't be.
Mhm.
Often Solomonic magic should be practiced in solitude for this exact reason, so that you don't confuse the normal sounds and stuff of society with as a sign, I guess.
Okay.
uh I've had some have said that they've had doors slammed shut, you know. So asking, and obviously also the best way is like if your result is given, you know, if you're there to ask for money or for wisdom, and within the coming week you know, someone hands you a check, or you stumble upon a book that has the answers you've been looking for exactly, that's almost proof in it itself, you know.
Okay. So sticking to that point, then obviously asking for money or getting what you want, and you touched on it earlier, where making a deal with the devil. Now, there's a lot of theories about the Hollywood and the music industry being very deep in the occult, and a lot of contracts with Satan and that kind of thing. What is your opinion on that? Is there some truth to that, or is that just crazy conspiracy theory?
um so I'll answer this. Do I think that magic is performed at, you know, celebrity politician levels? You know, like, are there magicians out there? Yes.
Mhm, mhm.
Do I think that there's like a secret cabal of, you know, ritual workers, you know, causing a one world society? I don't think so. Because, you know, on social media or Twitter or forums or just even in person, putting a couple magicians together, it's very hard to get them to agree on anything. I can't imagine people at the level of a politician where their ego is so elevated. I can't imagine them possibly working together in a way to, um, you know, to control the world together. I don't think that the communication and cooperation is there for something like that to happen. But if we do want to get conspiratorial, I'll give you, I guess, one lead. So there's a performance artist named Marina Abramovich, um, and she's been called by many to be kind of like the witch of Hollywood. Um, Me personally, some of the stuff she does is so out there and specific. I kind of would have to agree, and the fact that she's like trained some people supposedly, um, you know, that's like, but as that's the most evidence I have for stuff happening at high level. But I guess another example would be that, you know, a lot of professional sports players are they're very superstitious, and a lot of them believe in magic and stuff. Have you seen the film Uncut Gems?
No.
Okay. It's a recent film with Adam Sandler in it, and there's a basketball player who basically tries to take this gem that Adam Sandler has that he believes has magical powers or whatever. Um, and I think that that does happen on a scale. I think there are, like I said, professional singers or athletes who do look out for high level magicians, like corporate level magicians.
Mhm, mhm. So kind of like, obviously, you know, because there's a lot of clips on YouTube and whatnot where, you know, individually, if you look at them, they might not mean anything, but when you put them all together, it just kind of paint a picture, right? You know, when you've got Bob Dylan talking about he made a deal with, he can't say who, but
Mhm.
that's the price he had to pay for fame and fortune. And you know, you get a lot of these stories where these celebrities, whether they're movie stars or whether they're singers, they kind of had to make a deal with some entity, and that's the real reason they got their fame, and their riches. But the price and the cost was their soul. Now, is that is that accurate? Is there truth to that? Is there something to that? Or is it total BS? And I suppose linked to that is, obviously there's been a recent tragedy, with the concert. I mean, I didn't even know who the celebrity was before this tragedy happened. I think, was it Travis Scott or something?
Mhm.
And a lot of people saying, well, that was a ritual sacrifice, like that was a, you know, a cult ceremony. Is there an element of truth to this, or is this just people that have got too much time on their hands and looking for something?
I'll just say this.
Okay.
Our human brains have been evolved to seek patterns in
Mhm.
almost everything. There's a really famous game and like a training exercise that I give to people who want to learn magic. You know, people ask me, how do you prepare to have a spirit appear before you? Because that's freaky as hell, right? Literally freaky as hell. Um, and there's an easy game one can play where you basically go into a bathroom, turn off all the lights, have it very poorly lit in a candle, and you stare at your face long enough, your face will start to change shape because
Mhm.
your brain's trying to make sense of the shadow and limited light. And I think that's exactly what's going on with some of these sort of conspiracy theories. People are making ugly faces out of not having enough information there, or not really understanding the situation as much as they should. um yeah, I mean,
So does it happen? Obviously, forget that incident. But does it happen? Like, do some of these celebrities, do they make a deal with a devil or with an entity where they've basically made some kind of deal with an entity for their fame and fortune?
sometimes, because I think celebrities work in symbols and metaphors and stuff like that way more than I think the common person is used to. And I think sometimes that could be taken literally.
Mhm.
um like for example, the Church of Satan, while it's a religion, they're atheistic. Satan is more of it's a fictional character for them that they embody. um so I think a lot of these times when you have people claiming to make deals with devils or this sort of thing, it's kind of like a metaphor for them, like, I'm going to embrace my ego and I'm going to do what's best for me and put aside what others say. So um now, do I think some of them might have literal spirits they contact? It's very possible. If you look at my Goetic catalog, you see that there's a huge section on politics and social relations. So the Goetia is definitely it's very easily usable for building relationships and elevating your ego. For example, Baal, the first spirit within the Goetia, it said that his power is to bring invisibility, and not literal invisibility. That's a misconception. It's more of like the ability to act unseen. People ignore you or they don't know what you're doing. um but these spirits can work in opposites just as much as Baal can cause others to ignore your presence. He could elevate your presence to be seen more. um More people get attention of you. So that's just an example of like some of these abilities that I think celebrities take advantage of better than actual magicians. And I sometimes I joke to people that, I think some celebrities are better magicians than the ones who claim to be ones, because, you have some of the people who wrote some of the best books on like Solomonic Magic. At the end of the day, they're still selling talismans on Facebook, while you got like what's his name, uh Beyonce's husband, Jay-Z,
Mhm,
right? He
mhm, mhm.
some have claimed him to be part of Illuminati and occultism or whatever. I'm sure there's something to it. I don't know how evil it is, but like,
Mhm.
right? He's married to one of the top celebrities in the world, and he's famous. So yeah, I think sometimes these celebrities, like we're talking about the material part, I think sometimes these occult celebrities, they better embrace the material aspect than
Yeah, I
claimed
mean, it's
magicians.
interesting you bring them up because I did have them in mind, but I wasn't sure whether I should mention them or not. But I think with obviously Jay-Z, there's a lot of occult symbolism in his music, and I think I don't know if it was
Hmm.
his where one specific track is, he's got Lucifer, son of the morning or something, playing in the backdrop. But the idea of demon possession with Beyonce is that obviously there's Beyonce, she made the pact, and then Sasha Fierce is the demon embodiment. I mean, I remember seeing that YouTube video. I
Hmm.
don't have any thoughts for. I mean, I suppose I kind of do believe that yes, these celebrities they do a lot of this demonic possession kind of thing. But is there an element of truth to that aspect, or when these celebrities, these alter egos that they have, like Sasha Fierce for Beyonce, those are the demonic aspects?
It can be hard to say.
Okay.
Kind of tying back to to the beginning of my magical practice, I started within chaos magic, where chaos magic kind of has like an anything goes sort of way. If it works, it works. That's what's important. So whether it's psychological or spiritual, it almost doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Um, and I will say that like um, it like all magic, and it very much could be, at the end of the day, it could be really all psychological. I can't say for certain. I personally, I've had enough signs and things to make me believe that it's spiritual in nature. But um, you know, there's a lot of people who they use magic psychologically. One of I have another mentor who's he's like a chaos magician. Um, but he's also, he's, at the end of the day, he's an atheist and he's a computer programmer.
Mhm.
So he's a very like materialist point of view. But like he said, like magic, doing these rituals, there's something about being there in the moment doing a ritual compared to just kind of um you see, like, I don't know if you've heard about The Secret, the book,
Yeah, of course.
right? Like manifesting or
Yeah.
attract, like the attraction, right? There is something way different between wishfully thinking and being in the moment, having
Yeah.
like a set ritual,
Mhm.
that even if this was all made up, the psychological effects there are incredibly strong.
Mhm.
So these celebrities could just be taking advantage of the psychological effects. It could be spiritual. I don't know. I just say that because magic is rooted in symbols and like duality, and because naturally art and music and movies is rooted in that symbolic nature, I think they're very well skilled in performing magic in a way.
Okay. And not to drag this point on any longer, but um, oh, I've lost my train of thought now. I forgot what I was going to ask.
Mhm.
um, let me try and get that back. Yeah, so basically, there's this theory that possibly those that use dark magic or black magic, and they're using it to bring about, their evil plans for the world. The
Mhm.
theory is that they can't do anything without first warning people, and the warning comes from music or movies or stories or books. And once they've given the warning or given the plot of what they're going to do, that's when they can go ahead and do whatever they want to do. Is there an element of truth to that, or is that just another tale that doesn't exist?
Mm, I haven't heard of that before.
Okay.
I don't know. It sounds like a really, I don't know. At the moment, it kind of just sounds like a, I don't know, plot device or like a made up story.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine. Brilliant. Well, this has been very fascinating and entertaining. Before I finish up and give you the chance to obviously promote yourself, one last speculation or speculative thought for the future. So obviously, there's this idea that these entities, they can possess humans. Is it possible then that you could create an AI type of robot and then these entities possess that?
That's a big topic, and that's something I often use for I get in fights a lot with other magicians,
Okay.
because some claim that like the actual words are what are important, and I don't agree with that at all. I think it's the human, like the human part of it, speaking it, that um we kind of have a divine essence to us, um that other machines or animals couldn't possibly ever have. Because otherwise, why don't I just play a tape recording of a ritual and I go grab a burger and I could come back and the demons, the tape recorder's done what I needed to do, right?
Mhm.
um so I don't think robots or AI would be capable of performing magic. However, I do think, in terms, getting back to using magic for science and stuff like that, I do think magic should be encouraged to research something like AI to perform what would be magic for us, in a sense.
Okay.
That way, people can rely, like, people don't have to study magic and do all this research to get what they want. They can rely on science, which which is the beauty of technology, right? You don't need to understand the science or the mechanics behind it to enjoy its benefits.
Brilliant, brilliant. So let's just wrap up then. How can people contact you? What can they find out more from you? And after you've just given them where they can contact you, just tell us what is your mission? Like, what are you trying to do with this? Like, what is your whole goal? Not just for yourself, but let us know for yourself. But what do you want? Why do you want the world to tap into your ideas of magic, and what do you wish to bring about?
Mhm. Um, well, for me, I think, like I said, I kind of reframe Solomonic magic as kind of a philosophy or even a religion in a way,
Yeah.
because you know the practice itself, it's safe, it's very reliable. You have this really good thing here. But like I said, why call it Solomonic magic if you're not going to be Solomon outside of the ritual as well? I think it's important Solomon, he kind of embodied that link between the material and the spiritual very well. And I think embodying that is what's important, and giving back the riches you earn to the community it's very important. And it's kind of, we talked about black and white magic and left hand and right hand. In a lot of ways, I kind of see Solomonic magic as the unity of these two. Yes, use magic to gain riches, but you're also giving back to the world. And I also kind of want to unite the global community of Solomonic magic because, like I said, you see it practiced through multiple lenses. Without culture, there is no magic. It's magic is deeply rooted in culture, and you could see parallels, but there's also a lot of separate things. And I think trying to introduce the Solomonic magic within these separate cultures around the world would be beneficial, because you see a lot of claims of gatekeeping or cultural appropriation. And I think offering, I guess you could say, the Solomonic magic, the Solomonic method in each culture would kind of do away with the argument of gatekeeping, because people could kind of do the same magic, but from their own culture. Deep down the road, I do have goals to travel and write. So one of my, I like the Goetic catalog. I'm an author, and I plan on writing a lot of books. Deep down the road, I plan on going to different communities and working with local magicians or priests or such, and creating books that can be used to share like their knowledge with the world. As far as contacting me, I have everything on my Twitter account, which is twitter.com/Solomonic Magic. I have my email there. I also have, if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts and topics, I have a link tree there where you could find basically a mega thread of all my biggest and most important tweets. And there's a link there to purchase my Goetic catalog, which is a collection of all the different abilities and stuff that the spirits of the Goetian have.
So just let people know, what are they purchasing? Like, what do they get out of that catalog?
Well, for one, the entertainment value is immense, because there are some abilities in there that are just flat out incredible, like summoning spirits or causing waters to warm. So it's very interesting seeing like what people, if one's a complete secular person or doubtful or skeptical, it's kind of a fun book to read, because it kind of shows what people desire through these spirits. Like, what are the sort of things that people have searched for? But if one is a practitioner, it offers so many options and an easy to way to find the categories of these spirits, because this book is, there's really no other book like it at the moment. If one wants to work with the Goetia spirits, you kind of have to read the whole Goetia to understand what each one does before my book came out. But now with my book, if you want to do money, you could just look to the money category, and it has all the spirits listed there that would help you with that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. The time's flown by. Apologies
Yes.
for going on for too long, but appreciate you coming on, and thank you very much. And do you have any last words?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. This was really fun getting to discuss it. This was especially cool for me that since you're Muslim and you have a greater insight on some of the aspects of Islam that I appreciate. And yeah, I asked people to follow me. I got a lot coming up within the next couple months. I kind of want to leave it as a surprise for right now, but
Okay.
I do have a lot planned, so be on the lookout.
Brilliant. Well, once again, thank you very much. And as for you, the viewer, I hope you found that entertaining and valuable, because I certainly did. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.